Now, for this lesson, we're going to be discussing the domain and range of functions. Okay? So, before we get started, first I want you to notice here that this circle here is open. Okay? And this one up here is closed. So, when we do our domain and our range, if the circle is open like this, then you're going to put a parenthesis in front of the number. But if it is closed like this one up here, then you're actually going to put a bracket. And this will be important because whenever you do like your boom cards for this lesson, if you don't put the right symbol in front of these, it will count it wrong. And it will be wrong because that symbol tells whether or not that's open or closed. Okay? So now to find the domain, what you're going to do, remember the domain has to do with your x. Okay? So you're going to look and you're going to see where this dot right here is sitting on the x-axis, not the y, the x, okay? So if we run it up, we see that it's here on -3. And again, this is open, so when I put that in, I'm going to put a parenthesis and I'm going to put -3 and put a comma, okay? Now I'm going to see where it's stopping at on the other side, okay? So the farthest that it goes is to +3 over here. So I'm going to have a +3, and then I'm going to put a bracket because, like I said, it's got a closed dot. Okay, now our range has to do with our y. Okay, so if we look here, the farthest that this right here is going to trace to is 4. Okay, so it's going to be, and again, it's open, so it's going to be -4. And then the highest that it goes up, if we trace this one back, is to 2. Okay? And then the last thing it's going to want you to do is to tell whether or not this is a function. And if you remember from last time when we were talking about our functions, we would run as a vertical line test. So that means if we run a straight line down on all these lines here where these sit, is there anywhere that you would see it at both the top and the bottom? Is there anywhere on any of these lines here where this is crossing twice? No. So since it doesn't cross anywhere twice, it doesn't cross the x-axis twice on any point, then we would say that yes, it was a function. Okay? Now let's look at this one over here at number 2. So if we look at number 2, if we're looking for our domain, we see that on the x-axis it goes between -1 and +1. Now this time, when we look at our dots, we can see that they are both closed. So this time, when we put this in, we're going to put a bracket in front of both of these. So we're going to have -1, comma, 1, and then put the bracket. Okay. All right. And then if we look at our range is very similar because it's sitting on -1 and on +1 on the y. So again, we're going to have our brackets at -1 and +1. And we're got both of them in brackets, like I said, because if we looked at what these right here were before, we see that we actually had 2 solid dots, okay? And then the next thing, is it a function? Now, if we look and if we were running our vertical line test, we can see that this doesn't cross the x-axis. Any of these points it's not going to be going across it twice. So again, yes, it would be a function. All right, now let's look at number 3. So this time we see that our domain is going from -2, and then the farthest point, even though it's not actually dealing with this point here, our farthest point is going to sit here, right? And this one is closed. If we put a dot here, this would be closed because this point is actually on that line. Okay, so we're going to have a parenthesis in the front, -2, because our first circle down here is actually open. So that means it's not actually on that line. It's just an open dot. Okay, and then our last coordinate, our farthest one, was a +2, and we're going to put our bracket to close it. Okay, now if we look at our range, this one was sitting on -1, and it's open, so parenthesis -1. And the farthest up that it goes would be 3, but again, that dot there was open. So since that dot was open before, we're still going to have a parenthesis on her. Whoops. We're still going to have, well, make that a 3. We're going to have another parenthesis. Okay. So, and then now with this one, if we do our vertical line test, if we run our vertical line at 1, we run a vertical line, well, we run a vertical line on 1, then we can see that on 1, we have actually, you know, this is the only place, but on this one, we said we would have a point here and a point here. We would have 2 y coordinates on that one line. So because that line's going to cross in more than one place, this would not be a function. Okay, let's look at number 4. So the first thing we're going to do is find our domain. So we're going to say, okay, if we run these lines up to our x's, where would they be? So these two x's, and remember they're both open, so we would actually have -4 and 0, and they're both going to have parentheses because they're both open as our range, as our domain. And then for our range, we've got -3 and a +4. And again, these are going to be in parentheses because they're open. They're not actually closed dots. Okay, and if we looked at this one, would it be a function? If we run these vertical lines, is there anywhere where this is going to cross more than once? Yes, it is crossing. You can see here on this last line that I draw that it does indeed cross. It crosses up here, and it crosses again here, and it crosses again here. So this one is definitely not a function. Okay, now for these next two, I would like for you to, on number 5, pause the video for a minute and see if you can figure out what number 5's domain, range, and whether it's a function or not. And then restart the video and we'll work it together and you can check and see for sure whether or not you got the answer right. Okay, so for number 5, the domain would have been open and it would have been -4. And then even though we're not going to use this point here because this one's actually going to hit this line here if we looked at it. So -4 and a 1, and since it's actually on the line, it's going to be closed. And then for our range, this point, the farthest down, is actually sitting on 0, and it's going to be closed. And our highest point is sitting up there on 4, but it's got a circle, so it's actually open. And then if we run that vertical line test, we can see here on our y-axis that that does touch 2 points right there on the axis. So no, it wouldn't be a function. Okay. I think that should be enough examples for you to be able to figure out what you're doing. So you can go ahead and go to your boom cards and try to do this lesson.